from me! Get away from me! Why are you yelling? No! What are you doing? Stop smiling at me! Smile 2 was written and directed once again by Parker Finn, who did the shocking 2022 hit Smile, a film that I thought looked pretty goddamn shitty. When the trailers appeared, I thought it looked really goofy, it looked really just goopy, and also just looked like it had a pretty silly premise. Surprise, surprise, I really enjoyed Smile. Maybe it's because I was with an engaged audience, maybe it's because my expectations were in the goddamn Earth's crust, or it's the fact that I just ended up enjoying it because I thought Parker Finn took a pretty simple premise. It was basically The Grudge, The Ring, whatever, human centipede together. It was the idea that a curse, once you see a shocking tragedy take place in front of you, will follow you. And unless you were able to get rid of it in 7 days by making somebody else witness something, or you die, then then basically the curse will consume you. That's it right there. I liked First Smile. Fuck you. So, when that one was such a smash hit to the point that Paramount thought that they should put it on Paramount Plus, they were like, test audiences are saying this is good. Let's put it in theaters. It made over $100 million, over $100 million in the U.S., and I don't know how much it made worldwide, but it was a big old hit. $17 million budget. And they made the most of it. Again, not the most wholly original concept, but I thought, okay, first time viewing, maybe it won't be as good on the second viewing. It was. I've seen Smile 3 times. And when I saw they were making a sequel, I was like, okay. I mean, I get it because it made oodles of money, but I was a little bit concerned because I was like, where else can you go with this? A really good sequel will take the concept, the bare bones, whatever, of the original, the blood, the guts, and everything, and they will not the AEW cage match that gets totally out of control. It will basically just take the ideas of it, the central nervous system, and it will take it off in a different direction with a fresh coat of paint. I don't think that's how that saying goes. And a bad sequel will maybe give you something just to entice you, and then we'll tunnel back into the original and basically take a goddamn dirt nap for about 2 hours. So let's talk about Smile 2. This features Naomi Scott, the incredibly gorgeous and talented, just alluring Naomi Scott. My goddamn goodness. What a star. I just wish she made better movie choices because she was in the live-action Aladdin movie in 2019. And if you guys remember that movie, it's probably strictly for the fact she played Princess Jasmine. And me, oh my, down the bayou, she looked great. And she can sing. See, I forgot she could actually sing. And she is playing a pop star named Sky Riley, who had a certain thing occur a bit before that will basically play into the particular finish of this. And she is about to embark on basically a career renaissance tour. She's got her mother, played by Rosemary DeWitt, who I do have to say, I'm really happy she's getting into bigger movies once again. And she also has other people in her life. She has her assistant. This does have a cameo by Drew Barrymore. I'm trying to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, even if you've seen the trailer. But after witnessing something, basically, she is cursed by whatever this particular thing is. They don't really fully explain in the original what it is beyond, like, one scene where Susie Bacon and Kyle Gallner, who played Joel, not Vinesauce's Joel. If you get that, I love you guys. Basically, they talked to somebody about what it could be and explaining the rules and stuff like that. And it had a tremendous ending, to the point I can't hear the Chordettes lollipop the same way again. I actually get, traumatized hearing about that. Smile, yes, is silly, but it scared me. It actually genuinely scared me. Sure, it relied on some jump scares and everything, and I'm not going to say that the idea of this maybe wouldn't be, just close your eyes like, you're your Waterproof Blonde. There you go. Bet you didn't expect a Waterproof Blonde reference. I don't think even Waterproof Blonde remembers they were Waterproof Blonde. So that being said, Sky Riley overcoming the stuff that is referenced throughout the movie that we find out a little bit more information on. She is trying to pick up the pieces and do this tour, but then she witnesses this thing, and this entity is coming after her. She must solve this mystery before her tour, and more importantly, her life is absolutely history. Smile Two Tails, woohoo! So, let's talk about the positives. 1, Naomi Scott, incredibly attractive. Good grief, what an alluring beauty she is. But also, she dives into this role. She can sing. She put a tremendous spin on this. This is how you do a concert night or concert type thing. M. Night Shyamalan ding dong, not like Trap. Trap was meant to be a comedy. It just wasn't funny or scary or any good. And his daughter can sing, but she can't fucking act. So, Naomi Scott diving into this, role and committing to it. She's the most committed part of this movie. The sound design, much like the first one, very good. There's some nice drops in music. There's some nice, just pulsating stuff. I saw this in the RPX Regal version. Basically, it's Regal's answer to IMAX for those Regal theaters that don't have IMAX, and there aren't enough IMAX theaters to go around. More in the pity, except one in North Seattle, and I didn't want to drive that far. But the nice thing about this is you get other people in this, because in case you didn't figure out from the original, not a lot of good came out of that, in the sense that pretty much, like Lance Archer, everybody dies. Anybody who comes in contact with this thing, you die, mostly. Lucas Gage played Lewis. He was in Assassination Nation, which is a tremendous fucking movie. A movie you guys need to check out. 100%. Ray Nicholson was in this. Raul Castillo, and Peter Jacobson, who I am very happy is getting to divulge into horror. He was in House. He was also in Fly Me to the Moon. And Dylan Garcia, who is in Dream Scenario, and who is also an incredibly captivating beauty that I need to check out more of her stuff, because boy howdy, she really dove into the role of Gemma. So, I do have one question about this movie before I give my initial thoughts. How much money did Voss Water pay to be featured in this movie? In at least 30% of the scenes. It was actually kind of alarming. Now look, I understand marketing, sponsorship, pays the bills, and this did have a $28 million budget, so it was an increased budget, but not absolutely insane, because Paramount didn't want to go nuts. They didn't want to say, yeah, here's $60 million and it flops. But the Voss Water sponsorship, good grief, I don't ever want to see a bottle of water again in my life. It was insane. I don't know if Voss Water is any goddamn good. I don't know what the fuck Voss Water is. Apparently it's high-rise and hoity-toity and everything. But, good sound design. And there are elements of the original and everything in this. And Naomi Scott looks incredible, and Dylan Garcia turned in a decent role here, so did Rosemary DeWitt. Now, that being said, let's talk about the negatives. This is just more of a sequel that's going to tunnel back in on the original and go to sleep. This isn't scary. This isn't even really unsettling. It's just more of what Smile did with a bigger budget, with new people, except, I'll talk about that here in the spoilers, because we do find out what happens to one particular character from Smiles, is where I'm weaving in a few minor spoilers. But there are a few funny lines, and there are some decent scenes. There's one scene in Sky's apartment when things are really starting to ramp up that actually wasn't too bad. But the thing is, being comedic is fine, but this thing was more goofy, scary, and then also trying to be serious with a serious subject matter, and I don't think they found the balance. Besides Naomi Scott's performance, besides a few, pretty good actors here, it's following beat for beat what happened, and why not just watch the original instead of watching this, where it does everything that the first one did, and trying to ramp up the gore, only worse. It also runs a bit longer than it needed to. The original one ran about an hour and 55 minutes, that's with credits. You could argue that maybe a little bit of that could have been trimmed down, but I thought it was the perfect length. That is not what she said, and average is just another word for small. Whole point, this one is 2 hours and 7 minutes, and while the soundtrack actually is pretty good, and Naomi Scott does show off the tremendous pipage that she has, the tremendous pipes, that's what I mean. Never mind, I'm just going to move on from that. Great vocal talent. The thing is, it has so many elements of the original that you don't understand why they couldn't have gone in a bit of a different direction. yes, having an entity follow the same stuff, and yes, you have the Jason movies, and you have the Chucky movies, and you have stuff like that, and you have things that could become franchises, and they could do Smile 3, and they probably will. I don't know what else they could do necessarily, unless, I'm not saying a hard reset or a hard shift, but they got to go in a different direction. And yes, if you've seen the trailer, there are some kills that are referenced in this, and the gore is okay, but I gotta be perfectly honest, the gore is more just like, oh, okay, we're just going with that. That's not really scary. It's not even really funny. It's kind of just a mess, and not even a good kind of mess. But nevertheless, I'm going to get into spoilers. It's in theaters if you want to check it out, and it could be on Paramount Plus before the end of the year. But it is something, if you like the original, your mileage may vary on this. Again, Naomi Scott, tremendous, gorgeous, great at singing. Want to see her in more lead roles, good sound design, a couple decent moments, but it felt too stretched out, more of the same. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So, the beginning of this movie features Joel, Kyle Gallner, who saw, Susie Bacon's character, whose name escapes me right now, forgive me, haven't slept recently, sees her die, with the Eddie and that kind of stuff, sees her burn, and now he basically is haunted by all this stuff, because it's taking place in the immediate aftermath of the first movie. Because Joel was a cop, he is now seeing Susie Bacon's burning body. Burnt bacon, I'd still eat it. And the bacon. Moving on. He decides to knock over this drug house, so to speak, where he sees all this crazy, where he knows that, this crazy stuff's happening. He holds a criminal at gunpoint, ends up shooting one guy, and then shooting another, accidentally when the other guy tries to shoot him, and he's like, well, shit, somebody needs to witness this, because that's the key. Somebody needs to witness this. And then he sees somebody that was buying drugs from them. And he's like, I didn't know anybody else was here. Ha ha ha. And Kyle Gallner, by the way, he doesn't last long in this. But I thought, okay, they're at least trying to tie things up, explain what happened to him. That's fine. And then the other people in the drug house, or that are part of this flop house, get there. We have a bit of a shootout. He's bleeding from being shot by the guy that he shot on the couch. And then he kicks the wall air conditioner out of the goddamn window, runs out, is being shot, and then gets hit by a goddamn truck that skids off and conveniently has a Smile blood pattern on the road, because it skids off like this. And then we get the Smile 2 logo. So that was nice, and it even showed his foot being detached and all that. It's great. And then we cut to Sky Riley, who, once again, Naomi Scott, the blonde hair I wasn't sure how to feel about. She rocks it. She kills it. She's just so whatever, as the kids say. And she, after a year before, she's on the Drew Barrymore show, explaining what happened a year before. There was an actor named Paul, who is not Paul anymore. He's Super Paul. They were driving along, and there was an accident. They were both drunk, on drugs, whatever you have, whatever, your pleasure. And they ended up essentially crashing. He died. She was injured. And she has a bad back and had addiction and stuff like that. And she had to get treatment and go into rehab and everything. And she wants to make it right with her fans and with the people that she loves. There's also, so she's got a scar on her back. She's got a scar here. And she does take pills, but she's trying to manage her addiction. So one thing her grief counselor told her, or her drug counselor told her, take, drink a bottle of water every time you think of being, giving into your vices. Hence all the Voss water that keeps appearing. So she is ready to embark on a worldwide tour. Her mother's setting this stuff up. And there's some good, there are good pieces here. The one to play the assistant, he did fine. He was all right. He was a bit stereotypical as far as a goofy assistant, but actor did a pretty good job. And then she ends up going to this one guy's house, Lewis, played by Lucas Gage, who ends up, who is like freaking out. He's freaking the hell out. She goes to his house, to get some Vicodin. He's snorting coke and he's freaking out and everything. She knew him from high school. All this crazy shit's going on. But, he ends up, it turns out that he actually saw something terrible happen. He saw something absolutely horrible happen. He's like, shit. So now he's cursed by all this stuff. And he is freaking out. And then he sees the goddamn entity, because it's this giant tall entity that kind of looks like just like Cher, if Cher had no makeup on and was an undead creature. Just long hair, basically. Long hair and goofiness. And I know some people didn't like the creature design from the first one, but they hold off on that stuff in this, at least for a while. But he's freaking out, and then, he's freaking out, and then suddenly, and then he takes a weight plate, pretty heavy one, boom, boom. The third one finishes him off, his face all smashed, and he falls, and Sky's like, holy shit, she's freaking out. Now, her mother is her tour manager, and she says, the studio put a lot of money into this to try and get her career back on track. And there was an earlier reference, reference early on to an old friend named Gemma, played by Dylan Garcia, who they had a falling out a while before, I think about a year or so. Probably due to her addiction and probably due to the accident and all that stuff and everything. I mean, just the fact that when you're an addict, from, just knowing people that have been and some that have recovered, and some unfortunately it didn't, and addiction is a disease, it is terrible, she really does need her friend. And she was there for her for a lot, so she tries to make amends. She contacts her, and she's starting to really freak out. Because Sky does some signings and everything, and things are going good, but then this weird creepy guy shows up. Very weird creepy guy. It looks like he has burns all over his face. Stuff like that. It actually kind of looks like they were trying to emulate the creature from the first one. And he's all like, like all hugging and all this kind of stuff and everything, and talking about very creepy. Don't be that way if you ever meet your heroes. I mean, just how much he loves her and this kind of stuff, and your skin, so whatever, and all this, and that freaks her out, but then she decides to get back out there and do that, and then a little creepy girl shows up. That's pretty much the creepiest thing in the movie. The little girl captured that smile perfectly, did that in a movie called Smile 2. How dare you guys be accurate? But she is all creepy and just staring at her and just doing that, and it's great. That's great. That's a good scene. That's not bad. The movie does amp up the gore and everything, and it does kind of play on the stuff that, okay, she survived this accident, but she's got the surgery scars to prove it. She's nervous about, giving into her vices, nervous about letting other people down. And even though she has struggled and she has come out better on the other side, how much did that take out of her? And we see flashbacks of the accident and everything, where we see more stuff about how she suffered, she was beat up, and he was dead. And then we see later, and I'm just kind of tying all this stuff here, where she was fighting with him and actually grabbed the wheel and caused the car to crash off and everything. So she's the one that caused the accident. Even though they were both on copious amounts of drugs, he was a full-on dick, but she certainly wasn't any better. Now, she does get a hold of Gemma, and this right here is where the movie tips its hand too early. Because she contacts Gemma. Now, mind you, this entity has already been haunting her. She contacts Gemma and is talking to her, and Gemma agrees to come over. Conveniently, come right over after a bit. She has another freak out before Gemma gets there, and all this crazy shit's going on. So, she apologizes. Gemma forgives her. And Dylan Garcia, I thought, did a pretty good job here. And the idea was, oh, do you want me to stay the night? So everything's good. But then, suddenly she sleeps in. Her mother's pissed off because she was supposed to do this, the signing stuff, all this and everything. So all this stuff's tying together. She was also supposed to do this charity event thing that ties in a little bit later. And every outfit, costume or otherwise, that Naomi's got put on, killed it. Absolutely crushed it, I believe, as the kids say. At one point, it looked like she skinned a disco ball for her dress. And she looked great. Naomi Scott, meanwhile, is really trying to carry this goddamn movie because while the cast certainly, while there's talent in the cast and while people certainly try, there's this overall feeling that it's just more of the same, and it also feels stretched out. And she does dancing with, she does like a rehearsal with some of her dancers. And there's some good stuff there, but she has her back issues. She's freaking out about that stuff. She's worried that maybe, because at one point her leg got shattered, like her bone was sticking out of her leg. She's worried about that. All this stuff's piling up. And there's some good sound design as far as the crunching of bones and everything. But the movie feels goofy. And then where it really gets goofy, besides the fact they introduced Gemma and it was a little bit too convenient, you find out why a little bit later. There's more. It's Peter Jacobson who shows up. And his brother died, was one of the people that died. And basically he tore his jaw off with a crowbar and everything. We see a quick shot of that. And it's a way to like tie all the stuff to, the first movie and even events before the first movie, which I imagine they could do a prequel at some point to maybe tie stuff in, maybe to figure out how that guy ended up in jail. But the thing about this movie is it introduces Morris's character. There's this unknown messenger, this guy that's messaging, her about all this stuff. And it turns out that since she threw up in the apartment, Lewis's apartment, after seeing all that stuff, she is contacted by him. I'm not a creep. I'm trying to help you. I'm an ER nurse. And the only way to stop this entity, and he knows a whole lot about this entity. He studied this stuff. He tried to get a hold of Joel, but that didn't work because Joel died. And he hasn't been able to get a hold of anybody else. And basically, since it's latched onto her, the idea is to basically stop her heart for just long enough so the entity doesn't have a host and dies. Okay, sure, whatever. I don't really understand how we're going to be able to do that, but all right, how are we going to do that? I'm going to inject you with something, and we're going to stop your heart and just long enough so we can kill that entity for good. She naturally freaks out about this stuff, and he says, you've been possessed. This entity has been feeding off you for 3 days. And it feeds off of dark shit and dark matter and all that stuff, and it's actually... That part isn't bad, feeding off of the tragic stuff, but again, the first Smile wrapped things up a lot quicker. The reason this one pissed me off and why I'm going a bit longer than I planned in comparison to the first review is it bothers me just how repetitive this movie is. There is a point where her dancers and even fans, whatever, show up in her apartment and they're all piling and they're all doing this. It's like the Suspiria thing or Suspiria, however you say that, where they're all like, doing this and all the stuff on the stage, except they're doing it in a hallway to a loft apartment. And then staying around and getting her and bashing her head off the goddamn window and all this crazy shit going on. Okay, that wasn't a bad scene. Then she wakes up in some kind of fancy private hospital. Her mother's checking on her. She is trying to get a hold of Gemma because she had a freak out about the goddamn, like charity thing where she pictured her dead Paul, who isn't Paul anymore. He's Corpsey Paul. But a funny moment where she actually freaks out and sends the old lady to the... through the table like she's Mae fucking Young with Bubba Ray Dudley on SmackDown. If you get that right, I think it was SmackDown. It might have been Raw. A lot of that stuff blends together. But nevertheless, basically, she's just losing it, cracking up and everything. And she's talking to her mother, and then she has like a friggin' verbal spat, and her mother's just like, upset, like, you always do this. You always, blame others. You have responsibilities and everything in the... And then Naomi Scott basically says, I wish you would know what it was like in my head. But then it's obvious that that's not her mother. That's the entity. Or the entity pretending to be her mother. So the mother breaks the mirror, gets the glass, and stabs herself. And then Skye tries to run out. And then Skye realizes she's holding a piece of the mirror. She killed her mother. All this stuff is going on and everything. And that entity has their claws deep into... Skye. I wish Naomi Scott had her claws deep in me. Moving on. She is all just finally coming unraveled. She ends up freaking out, leaving the hospital, and she runs into Gemma. And Gemma got dropped off. She has a bunch of coffee for some reason. She has 4 cups of coffee. And this is right after Naomi Scott, by the way, has a gun and is trying to basically get out of the whole thing. She's like, no, I can't do it. I need to leave. She needs to get the fuck out of there. She runs into Gemma. Gemma's driving her off. She contacts Morris and says, we'll do the stuff. And then her phone rings and it's Gemma. That's right, it's been the entity this whole goddamn time. Okay, doing the fake out stuff, I understood it in the first one, but you need to either show a little restraint or go in a bit of a different direction, because like, okay, that was too obvious. When Gemma showed up, and which was all forgiving and stuff like that, like, no, that's the fucking entity. And it was the fucking entity. Because Gemma's like, I wasn't sure about calling you back and everything, and no, I haven't been over to your place. I haven't spent the night like she did, and all this crazy stuff. So the entity basically gets her. She manages to say, I'm in control, and she manages to somehow be in control, driving the car, but she gets to where Morris basically sent her. It's this old Pizza Hut with a freezer, and he's going to stop her hard and chill her body and get rid of the entity. Except then she sees her wrecked self from a year before above her, falls down, breaks a table, and now she's fully immersed in this stuff. All this crazy shit's going on. She is telling the entity she's in control, and she's doing this. She even bites the entity's thumbs off, and the entity's freaking out and stuff like that. And then Naomi Scott like gets this, fuck you, puts the thing in her neck, says it's gonna stop her heart, and there's no needle. Because she is fully caught up in all this stuff. None of this is real. None of this is real, so she's dead. Not yet. She's actually on stage about to go in front of thousands of people, and it's being broadcast, I assume. I assume it's being broadcast, simulcast. I don't know what the term is. But she's about to do her performance, and then sees a scary version of herself. And then the entity rips up, pops out, does this, forces down her goddamn throat, and she's freaking out. And then she gets up. And then she does the smile, and everybody's freaking out. Because then we hear, just ripping of flesh and stuff like that. And all this crazy shit. And now, not just one person, everybody in that goddamn thing witnessed something tragic. So now the evil spreads even further. Now that would have been fine, except it stumbled its way to get there. So, okay ending. Some decent moments. Naomi Scott's committed performance, but overall, I have to say it gets a C+. It just didn't really work for me. Because it kind of stumbled in the introduction of Morris and other stuff like that. It was obviously all in her head. It was her psyche, and it was her psychosis just taking over. And the entity playing tricks on her. I don't know. I just feel like it stumbled more than it should have. And while Smile 3, the idea intrigues me, again, besides Naomi Scott and the sound design, not really a whole lot to sink your teeth into. So yeah, C+. Agree, disagree what I said? Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.